Hello students, in this module we will be looking at the central nervous system, which has two major structures, the brain and the spinal cord. Our experience, our behavior, our sense of personal identity are all products of our brain. To understand the nature of our experiences, we need to understand the structure that is responsible for them. In this module, we will journey through the brain and spinal cord, which are two major structures of the central nervous system. We will conclude with an understanding of the concept of localization of brain functions. The crowning glory of the central nervous system is the brain. It sets humans apart from all other species by allowing us to achieve the wonders of walking on the moon, composing masterpieces of literature, art and music. The human brain, a spongy 1.4 kg mass of fatty tissue, has been compared to a telephone switchboard and even a supercomputer. But the brain is much more complicated than either of these devices. Dr. 𝗧𝗦𝗔𝗧, in his TEDx talk, calls the brain the grandest and oldest social network in the world. According to him, the brain has 100 billion users and Facebook has only 2 million. The 100 billion users are the brain's staggering 100 billion nerve cells or neurons. The way the brain communicates internally is through a technology that we have only recently discovered, wireless technology. It is amazing to think that this cutting edge technology has been used by the brain since time immemorial. The complexity of the connectivity between the nerve cells is mind-boggling. Each neuron can make contact with thousands or even tens of thousands of others via tiny structures called synapses. Our brains form 1 million new connections for every second of our lives. The pattern and strength of the connections is constantly changing and no two brains are alike. It is in these changing connections that memories are stored, habits learned and personalities shaped by reinforcing certain patterns of brain activity and losing others. Brain structure is shaped partly by genes, but largely by experience. Only relatively recently it was discovered that new brain cells are being born throughout our lives, a process called neurogenesis. The brain has bursts of growth and then periods of consolidation, when excess connections are pruned. The most notable bursts are in the first 2 or 3 years of life, during puberty, and also a final burst in young adulthood. How a brain ages also depends on genes and lifestyle too. Exercising the brain and giving it the right diet can be just as important as it is for the rest of the body. The brain and spinal cord are covered by a tough translucent membrane called the dura mater. Cerebrospinal fluid is a clear watery liquid that surrounds the brain and spinal cord and cushions them from jolts. The cranium or the skull surrounds and protects the brain. The spinal cord is surrounded by vertebrae. Also, some muscles serve to pad and support the spine. The blood-brain barrier protects the brain from chemical intrusion from the rest of the body. Blood flowing into the brain is filtered so that many harmful chemicals cannot enter the brain. The brain is also a major consumer of bodily energy. While it is only 2% of our body weight, it consumes 20% of our energy. The brain contains billions of interacting cells that integrate information from inside and outside the body, coordinate the body's actions, and enable us to talk, think, remember, plan, create, and dream. People often speak of their brains being composed of grey matter, but the brain also contains white matter. The grey matter is the cell bodies of the neurons, while the white matter is the branching network of thread-like tendrils called dendrites and axons that spread out from the cell bodies to connect to the other neurons. The extent of the brain's capabilities is unknown, but it is the most complex living structure known in the universe. This single organ controls body activities ranging from heart rate and sexual function to emotion, learning and memory. The brain is even thought to influence the immune system's response to disease and to determine in part how well people respond to medical treatments. Ultimately, it shapes our thoughts, hopes, dreams and imaginations. In short, the brain is what makes us human. I will now give you some interesting brain facts. There are about 100 billion neurons in the human brain, the same number of stars as in our galaxy. The human brain contains around 400 miles of blood vessels. Your brain generates nearly 25 watts of power while you are awake, which is enough to light up a light bulb. The left side of your brain controls the right side of your body, and the right side of your brain controls the left side. Every time you have a new thought or recall a memory, a new brain connection is made between two or more brain cells. A living brain is so soft you could cut it with a table knife. Loss of oxygen for just 5 to 10 minutes can cause serious brain damage. The brain can stay alive for 4 to 6 minutes without oxygen. After that, cells begin to die. Your cerebral cortex is about as thick as a doctor's tongue depressor, and it grows thicker as you learn more. Now, let's delve deeper to understand the structures and divisions within the brain. The brain can be divided into 3 major regions: the hindbrain, midbrain and the forebrain. These 3 divisions of the brain can be thought of as a hierarchy in which the forebrain controls the midbrain, which controls the hindbrain. The midbrain and hindbrain, known as the brainstem, is concerned with essential but non-cognitive bodily functions such as breathing, the regulation of blood flow and the coordination of locomotion. Basic processing of sensory information is also performed by the midbrain structures. The more complex processing occurs when this partly processed information is distributed up the hierarchy to the forebrain. The forebrain can be regarded as the executive center, which considers sensory information of all kinds and formulates commands, decisions and judgments based on the sensory information and on experience. Now, let us look at the hindbrain, which consists of the medulla, pons and cerebellum and are referred to as the brainstem. The medulla, which attaches to the spinal cord, has charge of largely unconscious but essential automatic functions such as breathing, heartbeat, swallowing, maintaining muscle tone and regulating circulation. A substantial amount of space in the medulla is occupied by bundles of ascending and descending axons carrying information traffic between the brain and the spinal cord. It is in the medulla that axon tracks descending from the cerebral cortex pass from the left to the right side, resulting in each hemisphere controlling movement on the opposite side of the body. The pons, which literally means bridge, includes a bridge of fibers that connect the brainstem with the cerebellum. It is situated just anterior to the medulla at the interface between the midbrain and hindbrain. It contains important sensory centers which receive information about the orientation of the body with respect to gravity and acceleration. The pons also contains several clusters of cell bodies involved with sleep and arousal and an important role in the control of facial expressions. The most complicated part of the hindbrain is the cerebellum, a structure specialized for the coordination of motor commands. In size, the cerebellum is second only to the cerebral hemispheres. Placed over the gateway between the brain and the spinal cord, it is in a strategic position to oversee the performance of complex movements. The cerebellum has a very distinctive appearance with a surface consisting of numerous ripples called folia separated by deep fissures. It is richly supplied with sensory information about the position and movements of the body and can encode and memorize information required for the execution of complex learned skills. The cerebellum has no direct connection to the cerebral cortex. Each side of the cerebellum controls the same side of the body. Damage to cerebellum disrupts fine motor skills such as those involved in writing and typing. The midbrain is the segment of the brainstem that lies between the hindbrain and the forebrain. The midbrain is concerned with certain sensory processes such as locating where things are in space. Running through both the hindbrain and the midbrain, lying at the central core of the brainstem, the reticular formation contributes to the modulation of muscle reflexes, breathing and pain perception. It is best known, however, for its role in the regulation of sleep and wakefulness. Activity in the ascending fibers of the reticular formation is essential in maintaining an alert brain. Damage to this area can cause a coma. Now coming to the most important part of the brain, the forebrain. The forebrain is the largest and most complex region of the brain, encompassing a variety of structures including the thalamus, hypothalamus, limbic system and cerebrum. The thalamus, hypothalamus and limbic system form the core of the forebrain. All three structures are located near the top of the brainstem. Above them is the cerebrum, the seat of complex thought. This relatively large structure may contain 70% of the neurons in the central nervous system. The wrinkled surface of the cerebrum is the cerebral cortex, the outer layer of the brain. The thalamus is a structure in the forebrain through which all sensory information must pass to get to the cerebral cortex. This way station is made up of a number of clusters of cell bodies or somas. Each cluster is concerned with relaying information to a particular part of the cortex. Apart from being a relay station, the thalamus also plays an active role in integrating information from various senses. The hypothalamus is a structure found near the base of the brain that is involved in the regulation of basic biological needs. The hypothalamus lies below the thalamus. One of the functions of the hypothalamus is to control the autonomic nervous system. It also serves as a vital link between the brain and the endocrine system. The hypothalamus plays a major role in the regulation of basic biological drives related to survival, such as fighting, fleeing, feeding and mating. The hypothalamus also contributes to the control of hunger and other basic biological processes including thirst, sex drive and temperature regulation. So, it is a very important part of the brain. The limbic system is a loosely connected network of structures located roughly along the border between the cerebral cortex and deeper subcortical areas. This system is involved in the regulation of emotion, memory and motivation. The limbic system is not a well-defined anatomical system with clear boundaries. It includes parts of the thalamus and the hypothalamus, the hippocampus, the amygdala, the stria terminalis, the septal nuclei and the cingulate cortex. The basal ganglia are a set of large structures toward the center of the brain. The limbic system is involved in integrating feelings, thoughts and movement along with helping to shift and smooth motor behavior. They are involved in setting the body's anxiety level and help modulate motivation. In addition, the basal ganglia are thought to be involved with feelings of pleasure and ecstasy. The cerebrum is the largest and most complex part of the human brain. It includes the brain areas that are most responsible for our most complex mental activities, including learning, remembering, thinking, and consciousness itself. The cerebral cortex is the convoluted outer layer of the cerebrum. The cortex is folded and bent so that its large surface area, about 1.5 square feet, can be packed into the limited volume of the skull. The cerebrum is divided into two halves called hemispheres. The cerebral hemispheres, the right and left halves of the cerebrum, are separated in the center by a longitudinal fissure that runs from the front to the back of the brain. This fissure descends to a thick band of fibers called the corpus callosum. The corpus callosum is the structure that connects the two cerebral hemispheres and is of vital importance in bilaterally coordinated cortical function. It is a communications bridge between the cerebral hemispheres and consists of a tract of about 1 million axons, half of them originating from the neurons in the right and half from the neurons in the left cerebral cortex. Each cerebral hemisphere is divided into 4 parts called lobes. The occipital lobe is located at the back of the head. This is where all the visual signals are sent and visual processing begins. This area is called the primary visual cortex. The parietal lobe is in the front of the occipital lobe. It includes the area that registers the sense of touch, called the primary somatosensory cortex. It is also involved in integrating visual input and in monitoring the body's position in space. The temporal lobe lies below the parietal lobe. The temporal lobe contains an area devoted to auditory processing called the primary auditory cortex. The frontal lobe is the largest lobe in the human brain. It contains the principal areas that control the movement of muscles called the primary motor cortex. Now, let us look at the spinal cord. The spinal cord is part of the central nervous system and connects the brain to the rest of the body through the peripheral nervous system. It is an extension of the brain. Like the brain, it is enclosed by the meninges and bathed in cerebrospinal fluid. The spinal cord runs from the base of the brain to just below the level of the waist. It houses bundles of axons that carry the brain's commands to peripheral nerves and relay sensations from the periphery of the body to the brain. The spinal cord plays a critical role in distributing the signals between the brain and the peripheral nervous system. Housed within a tube-like structure composed of a series of bones called vertebrae, the spinal cord looks something like a long, white, smooth rope extending from the neck to the small of the back. Along the length of the spinal cord are spinal nerves that branch out between pair of vertebrae. These nerves connect with various sensory organs, muscles, and glands served by the peripheral nervous system. The spinal nerves occur in 31 matched pairs, with one nerve of each pair connected to the right side of the spinal cord and its counterpart connected to the left side. Thus, the spinal cord can help coordinate the two sides of the body. The spinal cord has a relatively simple structural organization. A central region of gray matter containing synapses and the cell bodies of neurons, and a surrounding white matter consisting of the axons transmitting information up and down the cord. The spinal cord is segmental, and at each segment there are two pairs of roots, one dorsal and one ventral, which connect the spinal cord to the body. The ventral roots contain the outgoing axons of motor neurons and the dorsal roots contain the incoming axons of sensory neurons. The cell bodies of the sensory neurons reside in swellings called dorsal root ganglia close to the spinal cord. Cell bodies of the motor neurons are found in the ventral grey matter clustered together in functionally related groups. Thus, motor neurons that innervate a given muscle are grouped together and motor neurons of the extremities are found laterally in the cord, whereas those innervating trunk muscles are more centrally located. This grouping by function simplifies the task of activating groups of muscles sequentially to produce coordinated movements. Interneurons in the spinal cord connect the sensory input to the motor output and provide the neural circuits that underlie simple reflex behaviors such as the familiar knee-jerk reflex. All complex behaviors require integration and coordination at the level of the brain. However, certain reflexive behaviors such as a leg jerk in response to a tap on the kneecap or the quick withdrawal of the hand from a hot stove do not require brain processing. Both are rapid automatic reflexes controlled by centers within the spinal cord. Different parts of the spinal cord control different reflexes. Many forms of paralysis result from damage to the spinal cord. So, now to summarize, we looked at the central nervous system, which consists of the brain and the spinal cord. We looked at the different structures of the brain and their functions, and also at how the spinal cord, which is attached to the brain, plays a very important role in the functioning of human behavior.